When children can't speak for themselves, others need to speak for them. A voice mandated by law.
These professionals are a really key part of our child welfare system. They get to know and build trust with children. As trusted professionals, children confide in, children talk to.
Ida Drury is the principal investigator of the Child Welfare Training System at the Kemp Center. They work with the Colorado Department of Human Services to train 15,000 mandatory reporters every year. That includes teachers who see it all.
We really encourage mandatory reporters to fulfill the diligence that's outlined in the law by making reports that come close to things like sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, and then also neglect, which constitutes about 80% of the reports that we see in Colorado.
Educational neglect is when a student misses at least 5 days of school per month. That's when they are trained to make a report to DHS.
I think educational neglect is hard. Whether or not it rises to the level of abuse or neglect is a much higher bar.
He did miss usually at least 1 day a week.
Based on attendance records from Ashley Elementary, Dametrious Wilson was a victim of educational neglect during the school year leading up to his death in June 2022. 19 days into the school year, he had already missed 10.
Susan had emailed asking if we could put him on remote learning, and we told her that that wasn't an option.
On September 20th, 2021, Dametrious' second grade teacher Reed Gibson got an email from the school attendance secretary.
It wasn't right that she was trying to keep him out of school for 2 weeks.
Emailing a colleague to sort of check your gut is really okay.
The school attendance secretary wrote in part, Dametrious' aunt Susan called to ask if we can put him online for a few weeks. He is destroying the house and not listening, so she is keeping him home for a few weeks. No call was made to DHS.
Can I just be straight up with you? Yeah. I don't think that would have gotten screened in. I mean, if you called just that in, I don't see the suspicion there necessarily.
Instead, DPS tried to handle the absence internally by sending the Department of Public Safety to conduct a welfare check. No one answered the door, and there was no follow-up.
We've heard about this a lot. I think institutions try to manage their personnel in their own systems. Does that really make sense in terms of having extra stopgaps to make the report?
Throughout the rest of the school year, Dametrious missed minimum 5 days per month for 5 consecutive months. His absences went unreported to DHS.
Ultimately, if you're calling the hotline and you're making a report of child abuse or neglect over that hotline, that meets your muster for making a report of child maltreatment. It's as simple as that.
2 previous reports made about Dametrious and his older sister Noelle were screened out, meaning not investigated any further. One in November 2019 and one in October 2020.
Screen out fatigue, I think, is something that I've heard from mandatory reporters is so discouraging.
Mandatory reporting laws are flawed for a number of reasons.
Flawed because according to Colorado's Child Protection Ombudsman Stephanie Villaforte, mandatory reporters don't understand how the law operates, often resulting in a lack of reports.
There's a lot of ambiguity around the law. We have, I think, amended Colorado's law 31 different times, but not in a substantive way. We keep adding more reporters. And really, it's because of the lack of precision with which we write these laws, with which we train professionals. We're leaving kids exposed on all ends.
We've really been too general.
Now Colorado has created a task force in hopes of improving their training.
All are invested in this idea that we can come together and create a system where we're more accurately identifying those children who may be at risk of harm.
The mandatory reporters on the task force want to simplify the process, improving the voice for children who need it most.
We want to just make sure that as mandatory reporters are doing a good job and they're reporting the types of things that they don't look back on later and say, oh shoot, I knew something was happening there and I just didn't get the chance.
Now in this story, there were 2 different examples of how mandatory reporting happens. Dametrious' teacher filed a report directly to Human Services. The school attendance secretary who took Susan's call did not. Instead, she offered support to Susan and Dametrious and relied on DPS's internal system. However, everyone in a DPS school is required to go through mandatory reporter training yearly. They are taught to file that report through the internal system, Human Services, and Denver Police Department. these are the extra steps that they say often result in reports going unfiled. And that's why a task force is now meeting in hopes of simplifying the process.
So Darius, you talk about this training. Any idea of maybe any improvements that are happening at this time for that?
I think that's what this task force is hoping to do, but immediately, one thing that they've already done this year, the training is now available in both English and Spanish. Before this year, that wasn't the case. You kind of wonder how, but you're glad that it has happened.
It seems like there's got to be a more streamlined process, because it seems like there are all these places that people can report, and maybe someone thinks, well, this person reported, so I won't. Maybe this person does. That seems to me where the gap is, and that needs to change.
Yeah, I definitely think that's one thing that Ida spoke about in the interview, is different organizations or different agencies having these extra internal processes that then lead to reports going unfiled, because they're telling you, okay, we want you to reach out to Human Services, but when you do that, we also need you to go through the DPS internal system to do that. We also need you to contact Denver Police and do all of these different steps, when you can just sit there and pick up the phone and make one call to 1-800-CO for kids, or you can go online and fill out the form. So there are simpler ways to be able to get it done and do it, and because of these extra processes, it often results in these reports going unfiled. And I think that's where this task force, they are meeting 13 meetings over the next 2 years to really be able to come together, and all of these people are mandatory reporters who have had experience doing this, so hopefully their expertise will really help drive this forward and drive some change when it comes to the law and the training around it.
Basically, an unnecessarily complicated process could be putting these kids in danger.
An unnecessarily complicated process when you're trying to save children who may be experiencing child abuse or neglect. Why?
Yeah.
What struck me there is you said over the next 2 years they're going to meet 13 times. I mean, I feel like you need to get it faster, because clearly things are happening.
Yeah, I hope they heard that.
All right. Well, Darius, a lot to be uncovered there. We appreciate your work.
Thank you.